Commander Kim stood by the large window in her office. Outside, the training grounds of the Galactic Military Academy spread out under the bright morning sun. Young cadets ran, jumped, and practiced with their training weapons. Kim watched them with a serious face. She had been a soldier for 30 years, and now she trained the next generation of Earth's defenders. An aide walked in with a small computer pad. "The final list for the Vraxian exercise, Commander." Kim took the pad with a nod. She scrolled through the names, her grey eyebrows pulling together as she frowned. The Vraxians were sending many more soldiers than agreed. Earth was sending just 12 cadets. 12 against hundreds, she said quietly. "The Council thinks this is fair." The aide looked uncomfortable. "The diplomatic office says we must show trust to build peace." Kim had fought against the Vraxians 20 years ago. The tall-scaled aliens had technology far beyond human capabilities. Their warships could destroy cities from orbit. Their soldiers wore armor that could stop most human weapons. The war had ended not with victory, but with a tense agreement to stay away from each other's territories. Now suddenly the Vraxians wanted to be friends. Kim didn't trust it. She pressed a button on her desk. "Send in the selected cadets." 5. Minutes later, 12 young men and women stood in perfect lines before her desk. They wore the blue and silver uniforms of senior cadets, just months away from becoming real soldiers. "At ease," Kim said. The cadets relaxed slightly. "You 12 have been chosen for the first joint training exercise with the Vraxian Empire. This is both an honor and a huge responsibility." Cadet Tay, tall and strong with short black hair, stood in the front row. He was the best fighter in his class. Next to him was Cadet Sue, a small woman with quick eyes who could outthink most of her teachers. Behind them stood Jin, whose fingers could fix any machine, and Ha, who could learn any language in weeks. Kim walked slowly before them. "The exercise will take place on Serenity Base on the Moon. You will demonstrate Earth fighting techniques against Vraxian soldiers. They will do the same. Everyone will use training weapons only." She stopped and turned to face them directly. "This is not just about fighting. This is diplomacy. How you act will affect the future relationship between our species." Tay raised his hand. "Commander, how many Vraxians will participate?" Kim's mouth tightened. "They originally agreed to send 20. Now they say they're sending a battalion for observation purposes." The cadets looked at each other with worry in their eyes. "Don't be concerned," Kim said firmly. "You are the best the Academy has. Show them what humans can do." After the briefing, the cadets gathered in their common room to talk. Pictures of space battles and famous commanders hung on the walls. Through the windows they could see the distant mountains that surrounded the Academy. "A battalion?" Jin said, his eyes wide. "That's at least 200 soldiers." Sue sat cross-legged on a chair, already studying Vraxian battle tactics on her tablet. "They want to intimidate us, or they're planning something." "Maybe they just want to learn from us," said Ha, always the optimistic one. Tai stood by the window, looking at the clear blue sky. "Either way, we represent Earth. We can't fail." 3 days later, the cadets boarded the shuttle to the moon. The small silver ship lifted off smoothly, quickly leaving Earth behind. The blue planet grew smaller as they headed toward the gray, cratered moon. From orbit, they could see Serenity Base, a collection of white domes and towers on the flat plain of the Sea of Tranquility. Built 50 years ago as Earth's first permanent moon base, it now served mainly as a training facility. They approached. They saw the Vraxian ship already docked, massive and threatening, at least 10 times the size of their shuttle. "That's not a transport," whispered Jin. "That's a war cruiser." The shuttle landed with a gentle bump. Through the windows they could see lines of Vraxian soldiers waiting for them, tall figures in gleaming armor that reflected the harsh sunlight. "Commander." Kim stood up. "Remember your training. Remember who you represent. Be respectful but vigilant." The cadets nodded and prepared to exit the shuttle. None of them knew about the ancient defense systems buried deep beneath the moon's surface. Technology left from humanity's first steps into space over a century ago. Systems that had been forgotten in old records, but remained active, waiting for specific signals to wake them. The doors opened. The cadets stepped out onto the moon's surface, ready to make history. Behind them, Commander Kim watched with worried eyes. Ahead of them, the Vraxian soldiers stood in perfect formation, their alien eyes studying the humans with cold interest. The exercise was about to begin, and nothing would go as planned. The 12 human cadets stepped off their small shuttle onto the grey surface of the moon. Their special boots made soft crunching sounds on the dusty ground as they walked in a straight line toward the entrance of Serenity Base. Above them, the black sky was filled with stars, and in the distance, the blue-green earth hung like a beautiful jewel. Cadet Sue walked close to Tay. She was shorter than most of the other cadets, but her mind was sharp and quick. As they approached the main airlock, she looked at the landing area and counted the Vraxian ships. "This isn't right," she whispered to Tay, her voice tense. "There are too many ships. They were supposed to send 20 representatives." She pointed to the lines of Vraxian soldiers visible through the large viewing windows. "That's a full battalion, at least 200 soldiers." Tay's face grew serious. "Stay alert. Tell the others quietly." The cadets entered the base through the large airlock. After the door closed behind them, air filled the chamber with a hissing sound. When the inner door opened, they felt the artificial gravity take hold, making their movements normal again after the moon's weak pull. Inside, the base was bright and clean, with wide hallways and high ceilings. The walls were white, with blue lines marking different paths, but the cadets barely noticed their surroundings. Their attention was fixed on the large group of aliens waiting for them. The Vraxians stood in perfect rows, tall and imposing. Each one was at least 7 feet tall, with powerful bodies covered in scales that shifted colors in the light. Blues, greens, and purples that moved like oil on water. Their faces were almost human-shaped, but with flatter noses and eyes that were completely black, without any white parts. They wore what looked like simple gray uniforms, but even Tay could tell the material was far more advanced than human fabric. From the middle of the Vraxian group, one figure stepped forward. Even taller than the others, this Vraxian wore a uniform with silver markings on the shoulders. His scales had a golden tint that the others lacked. "Welcome, human cadets," the Vraxian commander said. His voice was deep and slightly buzzing, like a large insect. His mouth moved strangely around the human words. "We look forward to this educational exchange." The way he paused before saying educational made Tay feel uneasy. The commander's black eyes showed no emotion, but his body language, standing very tall with his head slightly tilted down, reminded Tay of a predator looking at prey. Commander Kim stepped forward and gave the formal greeting that the diplomats had taught her. The Vraxian commander repeated similar words, but his tone remained cold. "We will begin with equipment inspection," the Vraxian said. "Follow me to the training area." The training area was a large room with high ceilings and a soft floor that could absorb impacts. Racks of weapons lined the walls, some human, some Vraxian. The alien weapons were sleek and curved, with glowing parts that pulsed with green light. Jin, the cadet with the best understanding of technology, moved closer to the Vraxian weapons. He pretended to admire them while his trained eyes quickly assessed their design. After a few minutes, he casually walked back to Tay and spoke very quietly. "These have been modified recently. Look at the power regulators. They're jury-rigged." "What does that mean?" Tay asked, keeping his face neutral while they watched the Vraxians demonstrate their equipment. "Training weapons should only produce light or mild shock effects," Jin explained. "These have been altered. They could do real damage if the power limiters were disabled." Tay nodded slightly. "Tell Commander Kim when we get a private moment." On the other side of the room, Ha was using her small translator device near a Vraxian communication panel. The slim cadet with quick fingers had a gift for languages that the Academy had noticed early. She had studied Vraxian language patterns. For months before this mission, her device quietly recorded the signals being transmitted, and her eyes widened as partial translations appeared on her screen. Words like defense capabilities, weapon systems, and strategic assessment flashed in the partial translation. When the Vraxians moved to another part of the room, Ha quickly joined the other cadets. "They're sending encrypted transmissions." "To their flagship," she whispered. My translator only caught pieces, but this isn't about training. They're gathering intelligence on us. Our weapons, our tactics, our base design, this is reconnaissance. Tay looked around the room at the 200 Vraxian soldiers who watched the humans with cold, calculating eyes. He remembered his history. Lessons, how the Vraxian Empire had conquered 3 other species before humans had stopped their expansion 20 years ago. "We need to warn Earth," he said quietly. "But we can't let them know we suspect anything." Sue touched his arm. "Look at how they're positioned. They've placed guards at every exit. We're already trapped." Commander Kim approached her cadets with a forced smile. Behind her, the Vraxian commander watched with those unblinking black eyes. "The joint exercises begin tomorrow at 600, Kim told them. "We've been assigned quarters in the East Wing." As they walked to their rooms, the cadets maintained their calm appearance. But each one knew the truth. They weren't here for training. They were here so the Vraxians could study human weaknesses before their real attack began. The artificial dawn light slowly filled Serenity Base. The vast training arena had been programmed to simulate Earth's day-night cycle. Tay woke before the alarm, his mind already planning the day ahead. The other cadets were also up early, checking their training weapons and talking in low voices. "They think we'll be easy targets," Sue said, as she adjusted her training suit. "The blue material was designed to register hits from the training weapons. They'll expect us to use standard academy formations." Tay nodded. "Then we won't use them. Today we show them what humans can really do." At exactly 0600, the cadets entered the main training zone. It was huge, about the size of 4 football fields. The Vraxians had programmed it to look like a ruined city, with broken buildings and burned vehicles everywhere. The Earth cadets would play the defenders, while the Vraxians would attack in waves. The human group looked tiny compared to the massive Vraxian force. Over 200 alien soldiers stood in perfect formation, their scaled skin catching the light. "Remember your training," Tay told his team as they prepared to split into 4 squads of 3 cadets each. "We're outnumbered but not outmatched." He looked at each of them. "Sue, take north. Jin, east. Ha, west. I'll take center. Use the plans we made last night." The cadets nodded and moved to their positions. Last night they had stayed up late planning unusual tactics that the Vraxians wouldn't expect. Standard human military teaching wouldn't work against such numbers. They needed to be smarter. A loud horn signaled the start of the exercise. Immediately, the Vraxian forces began to move forward in a perfect line, their training weapons held. "Ready?" They moved with machine-like precision, covering the ground quickly. But the human cadets were nowhere to be seen. The Vraxians slowed, their black eyes scanning the ruined buildings. They had expected the humans to take defensive positions behind the larger structures, but there was no sign of them. Suddenly, a series of small flashbangs exploded near the front line of Vraxians. The aliens weren't hurt, but their formation broke as they turned toward the noise. From 3 different locations, human cadets fired quick shots and then disappeared again before the Vraxians could target them. "They're using hit-and-run tactics," growled the Vraxian commander, watching from a high platform. "Spread out and find them!" The Vraxian forces divided into smaller groups and began searching the ruins. But the human cadets had prepared traps. Some Vraxian soldiers stepped on hidden pressure plates that released harmless but confusing smoke. Others followed sounds that turned out to be recordings played by small devices the cadets had hidden. By midday, the Vraxians had lost nearly 50 soldiers to the cadets' surprising tactics. The training suits of these Vraxian soldiers showed they had been hit, and the rules said they had to leave the exercise. Jin's team had created a simple pulley system that allowed them to fire from one location while being in another. Ha's team used their knowledge of sound patterns to create confusing echoes that made the Vraxians fire at empty locations. Sue's team had mapped out quick escape routes that let them disappear before the Vraxians could respond. The Vraxian commander's scales had darkened to an angry purple as he watched his forces being embarrassed by 12 humans. His clawed hand reached for his communication device. "This is taking too long," he said to his second-in-command. "They are making us look foolish." The second-in-command nodded. "The High Command is watching this exercise. They expect results. The commander pressed a button on his device. "Initiate Contingency Alpha," he ordered in the Vraxian language, thinking the humans couldn't understand him. In the control room of the base, a Vraxian technician pressed several buttons on a panel. The lights in the training zone flickered. Briefly, Tay was about to signal another attack when his communication device went dead. Around him, he saw the other cadets checking their equipment with confused expressions. "My weapon isn't working," called Jin from his position. "Communications are down," Sue reported. Tay quickly realized what had happened. "Electromagnetic pulse, they've disabled our equipment." He looked around and saw Vraxian soldiers approaching from all directions, their weapons still working perfectly. They cheated. "What do we do?" asked one of the younger cadets, looking worried. Tay thought quickly. "Retreat to fallback position. Now." The human cadets ran toward an area they had designated as their emergency meeting point, a small building at the edge of the training zone. But as they approached it, they saw it was already surrounded by Vraxian soldiers. "This way." Tay suddenly changed direction, heading toward a small crack in the floor that he had noticed earlier. It looked like a design feature of the ruined city setting, but something about it had caught his attention. The cadets squeezed through the crack one by one, finding themselves in a dark tunnel. It was cold and dusty, clearly not part of the training program. "What is this place?" Ha asked as they moved deeper into the darkness. Jin activated the emergency light on his belt. The beam showed a tunnel that looked very old. "I think we're outside the training zone now. These tunnels must run under the whole base." They walked for about 10 minutes, hearing the sounds of the Vraxians searching for them grow fainter. The tunnel eventually opened into a large cave. And there, covered in moon dust but still recognizable, was a small outpost with the Old Earth Space Agency logo on its wall. "This is incredible," whispered Sue, looking at the abandoned control panels and equipment. "This must be from the first moon missions over 100 years ago." Jin was already examining the old technology, his eyes wide with excitement. "Some of this still has power. Look!" He pressed a button and dim lights flickered on around the room. "The Vraxians don't know about this place," Tay said, a smile forming on his face, "and that gives us an advantage." The cadets gathered around. An old table as Tay began to form a new plan, one that would turn the tables on the Vraxian forces waiting above. In the dim light of the underground chamber, dust floated in the air like tiny stars. The 12 cadets had spread out, exploring the forgotten human outpost. Old computers lined the walls, broken chairs lay on their sides. In the corner, empty food containers from a century ago sat on a small table. Jin moved quickly from panel to panel, his fingers tracing the old technology. His eyes lit up with excitement. "Look at this," he called out, dusting off a large control panel with his sleeve. A few small lights still blinked on it. "It's old, but I can get it working." The other cadets gathered around him. Above them, they could hear the faint sounds of Vraxian soldiers searching the training area. "How old is this place?" asked Ha, looking at the faded Earth Space Agency logo on the wall. "Over 100 years," said Sue, "from the first moon settlements before the Planetary Alliance was formed." Jin was already opening panels and connecting wires. "The power system is still active. They used nuclear batteries back then. They last for centuries." Tay looked over the room with new eyes. "Can we use any of this against the Vraxians?" Jin nodded, not looking up from his work. "I think so. Give me an hour." The cadets split into groups. Some helped Jin with the technology. Others watched the tunnel entrance in case the Vraxians discovered their hiding place. Tay and Sue examined old maps of the base they found in a drawer. "The base has grown a lot since these were made," said Sue, "but the main systems should still connect to these old controls." An hour passed. Jin called everyone to the main room. He had cleared dust from several screens that now glowed with green light. "I've got 3 systems working. Environmental controls, security protocols, and something special." He pressed a button. In the center of the room, a light flickered and formed into a 3-dimensional image of a soldier. The image wasn't perfect. It flickered and sometimes looked transparent, but it was clearly a human in a spacesuit. "These are holographic projectors," Sue realized, walking around the image. "Military grade. They were developing this technology for space combat training." "Can you make more than one?" Tay asked, a plan forming in his mind. Jin smiled. I can make hundreds, and with the security protocols I've accessed, I can project them anywhere in the base. Tay gathered the cadets around a table where Sue had spread out the old maps. Here's what we're going to do, he said, while the Vraxians continued their search. The human cadets worked quickly. Jin connected the old systems to the modern base network. He used her language skills to create fake communication messages in both human and Vraxian languages. Sue calculated exactly where they needed to place the holographic images for maximum effect. Almost ready, Jin said after 2 hours of work. Sweat covered his face despite the cool air of the underground room. The system can't sustain this for long, maybe 30 minutes at most. That's all we need, said Tay. He looked at each cadet. Everyone know their part? They all nodded. Then let's begin. Jin pressed a series of buttons. The old machines hummed and vibrated. Above them, in the main base, the lights flickered briefly. In-nigh. The command center. The Vraxian leader was growing angry. How can 12 humans hide from 200 Vraxian soldiers? Find them! Suddenly, alarms began to sound throughout the base. The main screen showed multiple ships approaching the moon. What is happening? Demanded the Vraxian commander. His communication officer looked confused. Multiple human vessels detected, Commander. They're not scheduled arrivals. Show me. The screen changed to show at least 20 large ships heading toward the base. Then the lights in the command center dimmed and came back on with a red glow. Emergency protocols activated, said a computer voice. Defense systems online. The Vraxian commander's scales darkened with fear. We have no defensive shields. What human ships are these? On another screen, security cameras showed hundreds of human soldiers appearing in various parts of the base. They seemed to be emerging from hidden doors and passages. In reality, Jin was projecting holographic images throughout the base. The fake ships were simple light projections in the sky. The soldiers were copies of the same few images, programmed to move in patterns that looked like organized military movements. Ha activated the atmospheric controls, creating patches of mist in key areas that helped hide the imperfections in their illusions. She also sent out fake communication signals that the Vraxians could detect but not decode completely. They're everywhere, reported a Vraxian soldier over the communication system. Human forces have surrounded our position. The Vraxian commander couldn't believe what was happening. How had the humans hidden such a large force? Was this whole exercise a trap? Then came the final part of the plan. Sue had found access to the moon's old defense grid, a system of lights and sensors that had once been used to track objects in lunar orbit. While the system couldn't actually fire weapons, it could create impressive energy displays in the sky above the base. Now, said Tay. Ha pressed the activation button. Outside the base, the lunar sky lit up with bright beams of light shooting upward. To the Vraxians, it looked like powerful weapons being aimed at their ships in orbit. The Vraxian commander received panicked messages from his flagship. Their sensors showed energy readings they couldn't explain. Their communication systems were being blocked by unknown technology. Faced with what appeared to be an overwhelming human force and unknown weapons, the Vraxian commander made a quick decision to save his soldiers. He opened a communication channel to all frequencies. His voice shook slightly as he spoke the words no Vraxian military leader had spoken in centuries. We surrender to your superior forces. Please, cease your attack. In the underground room, the cadets looked at each other in shock. Their desperate plan had actually worked. The most feared military force in the galaxy had just surrendered to 12 cadets with 100-year-old technology. They surrendered, Ha whispered, barely believing it. Tay nodded slowly. Now we need to figure out what to do with 200 Vraxian prisoners before our holographic army disappears. The small communication room in Serenity Base buzzed with activity. Human officials from Earth had arrived quickly after the surrender. They wore serious faces as they talked to the cadets and examined the old technology that had fooled the Vraxians. You used century-old projectors to create a fake army, asked one official, her eyes wide with disbelief. Jin nodded, still tired from the intense work. The systems were simple but effective. The Vraxians couldn't tell the difference. News of what happened traveled fast. Within hours, the story reached the Galactic Council, the group of representatives from all spacefaring species that governed interstellar relations. The council chamber on the neutral planet of Centauri Prime filled with shocked voices as the details emerged. The human representative, Admiral Lee, could barely hide his smile as he addressed the council. What began as a simple training exercise revealed a disturbing truth. The Vraxian Empire was planning an attack on human territories. The Vraxian representative, his scales a dull grey with shame, could not deny the evidence. Investigators had found 3 large Vraxian fleets hiding in the shadow of Jupiter's moons. They were waiting for information from the training exercise before launching their attack. On the Vraxian homeworld, their military leaders faced the Emperor with lowered heads. The Emperor's scales flashed angry red as he learned the truth. "You surrendered an elite battalion to 12 human children," he roared, his tail smashing against his throne. "The most feared warriors in the galaxy, defeated by tricks and old machines?" The military commander trembled. "We believed we were surrounded by superior forces. The readings showed thousands of human soldiers and powerful weapons. There were 12 of them." The Emperor's voice echoed through the palace. 12! Back on Earth, the transport ship carrying the 12 cadets landed at the Galactic Military Academy. They expected to return quietly. Instead, they found thousands of people waiting for them. The crowd cheered as the cadets walked down the ramp. News cameras flashed. People held signs with the cadets' names. "What's happening?" Ha asked, looking at the crowd with surprise. Commander Kim met them at the bottom of the ramp. She was smiling, a rare sight. "You've become heroes. The whole Earth knows what you did." The next few days passed in a blur. The cadets met with world leaders, gave interviews, and received medals. Children asked for their autographs. Toy companies made action figures that looked like them. 1 week after their return, they met with Commander Kim for an official debriefing. The 12 cadets sat around a large table in a secure room deep inside the academy. "Your actions have changed the balance of power in the galaxy," Kim told them. "The Vraxian Empire has withdrawn all their ships from human space. Their invasion plans are cancelled." "What happens now?" asked Sue. "The Vraxian Emperor has requested peace talks," Kim said. "Real ones this time. They want to establish a permanent treaty with Earth." Tay looked surprised. "Because of what we did?" Kim nodded. "Your victory showed them something they didn't expect. Humans have always been considered technologically inferior to the Vraxians, but you proved that technology isn't everything. Human creativity and adaptability can overcome superior numbers and weapons." "We never intended to become diplomats," Tay said quietly. Commander Kim smiled. "Sometimes the best diplomacy comes from unexpected places. Your actions spoke louder than years of formal negotiations." On the Vraxian homeworld, a similar conversation was taking place. The Emperor sat with his top advisors in the Imperial garden. Large red flowers hung from tall trees, and small flying creatures moved between the branches. "We must reassess our understanding of humans," the Emperor said. His scales had returned to their normal blue color now that his anger had passed. "They are more dangerous than we thought." The ambassador, who had spent more time among humans than any other Vraxian, nodded. "They lack our strength and technology, but they make up for it with creativity and unexpected tactics. They don't think like we do." "Can we defeat them in war?" asked a military advisor. The ambassador considered the question carefully. Perhaps, but the cost would be too high, and victory would never be certain. "These 12 cadets defeated our best soldiers with 100-year-old technology. Imagine what their actual military could do." The Emperor made his decision. "Prepare for peace talks, real ones this time. We will find a way to share the galaxy with these humans." As the ambassador left the garden to prepare for his journey to Earth, he spoke quietly to his assistant. "Never underestimate humans," he said, remembering the reports of how 12 young cadets had fooled an entire battalion, especially not their cadets. 2 weeks later, the Vraxian ambassador stood before the Galactic Council. Beside him stood Admiral Lee representing Earth. Together they signed the first true peace treaty between their species. In the audience, the 12 cadets watched quietly. They wore their formal uniforms with new medals shining on their chests. They had not only prevented a war, but had started a peace that might last for generations. As Tay watched the historic moment, he thought about how much had changed because of one training exercise gone wrong. Sometimes the biggest changes in history come from the smallest moments, and sometimes heroes are made by accident. The end.